This is the Reason Interview with Nick Gillespie. Before you do anything else, subscribe to my brand new YouTube channel. It's at youtube.com/the @ and then the line, The Reason Interview. That's youtube.com/@the Reason Interview. My guest today is Cliff Asness, the billionaire founder of AQR Capital, pioneer in quantitative finance, University of Chicago PhD, and self-described part-time Republican and full-time libertarian. Cliff talks bluntly about why Donald Trump is spectacularly wrong on tariffs and trade, his concerns about the authoritarian tendencies of the president and his supporters, and how capitalism may actually be getting less efficient due to social media. We also discuss how Cliff came to his libertarian beliefs, where right-wing populism overlaps with its left-wing version, and why he thinks free minds and free markets will win eventually, but only after a very long slog. This conversation was recorded live at an event in New York City. Here is the Reason Interview with Cliff Asness. Cliff Asness, as many of you know, is the principal at AQR Capital Management, which has $128 billion in assets under management, which would make it about the 60th richest country on the planet. You're doing better than Kenya. And
no one's going to feel bad for me, but I don't get to keep all that. You know that, right?
All right. Yeah. Well, what I want to start with, actually, is that in 2018, you had $226 billion under management.
You're going to lead with that?
So, yeah, well, my question is, what does it feel like to, lose $100 billion in this economy?
You know what feels good? 25 years ago, having $1 billion under management and going to 128. Wow. But seriously,
that's serious cope.
The hedge fund world in particular, and not everything we do a lot of traditional stuff too. It's very punishing when you have bad periods. I've argued against this when we've been having very good periods, that people run away from good strategies, they pile into bad ones. From 18 through 20, and this is far from all we do, but it looked like all we do for a few years, was, as we measure it, the worst period we've ever seen for so-called value investing. The dot-com bubble, which annoyingly a minority of you seem to have been of legal age for, which I make a lot of those comments these days as I get closer to 60. That was the second worst, and we did terribly in that one too, and in both of them we more than came back. But assets take a while to come back.
And you said you're more profitable now with
I wasn't going to tell all them that.
Okay,
I told you that. Yes, our mix of products and performance fees, I'm not starting a GoFundMe page.
Okay, good to hear.
Unless you guys think it would work.
So what does AQR stand for?
The A is not me.
Okay.
I think I could have named it that at the beginning, but it's the most boring name in the world. It's applied quantitative research. It's the IBM of names. Yeah. The funny part is when a small group of us was thinking about leaving Goldman Sachs, this was 1997. Oh, God. We got together maybe 3 or 4 times to discuss it. What you should be discussing is it the right thing to do? Do we owe Goldman Sachs more? Will it work? What are the risks? Every conversation deteriorated to what should we name this thing if we leave. We came up with every crazy name in the world, every mythological figure, every wild beast, and we settled on IBM.
Okay, there you go. Or the equivalent, right? It's better manually, that's what IBM stands for?
I worked at IBM in 1985 for a summer.
Well, talk about capitalism writ large. You were born in '66. Is capitalism doing better now than it was, say, then, or in 1986? Or how do you think about, broadly speaking, is capitalism, we won the Cold War, right? Capitalism won the Cold War. Is capitalism better now than it was? If so, why?
Well, 66, for the first 2 or 3 years, I wasn't paying very close attention. Okay. In general, if you just go by living standards, not just here, but globally, I don't think you can escape that things are wildly better.
Right.
I would attribute more than all of that to capitalism. Others might debate, people in this room, on that, but I would. Though I see the whole period, and particularly maybe the last 10 or 20 years, as a battle between technology getting better, and I mean that also writ large, not just your iPhone, but management processes, container ships, automated factories. That has been a huge pro. Again, probably shocking no one in this room. I think policy has only generally gotten worse. There have been blips that have been better at times.
But capitalism has figured out ways to rat around bad or mediocre policy.
It's like there's one really good thing, technological advancement, being run mostly by the profit motive, and then stupider and stupider things. And magnitude matters. This one's been big. I thank God this one's been bigger than this one. It doesn't guarantee it will always be the case, though.
Do you feel like the big deregulations, at least of the U.S. economy, starting in, I guess, really in the 70s, but kind of proceeding apace, is that a one-time thing, or do you constantly need to be tuning the machine down?
I think it's constant. It creeps back. A friend of mine, Jonah Goldberg, has a book, The Suicide of the West, where he has this analogy of the jungle. You can't just carve out your little area of the jungle and then not pay attention. And the jungle takes it all back in about an hour and a half. So, yeah, the 70s, again, I wasn't paying the closest attention at the time, but Jimmy Carter, of all people, gets a fair amount of credit for a lot of deregulation. Went on through the Reagan years. Clinton did a fair amount. Obama and Biden and Trump won. Maybe Trump 2 will be better, but
not so good, right?
No, it just
Bush,
grew and
Bush
grew and grew.
was terrible too.
Bush
George
was terrible
W,
too. Both Bushes, particularly the older Bush. I remember the ADA coming out. I'm like,
the Americans with Disabilities
I'm like,
Act,
that's a Republican thing?
Well, Bob Dole was the chief sponsor.
Yeah, well, that's like saying that I should be the chief sponsor for a pro-baldness bill. I feel bad for the guy, but he doesn't get a whole bill.
Right. Where do you think is policy, the kind of growth of policy to restrict or regulate or oversee capitalism, is that, is it driven by people not knowing history? Is it driven by some other kinds of processes? Because why, through at least the end of the Cold War, you would say, okay, well, we knew what we were fighting against, but then once that's over, do people forget that actually producing wealth is the hardest thing as opposed to redistributing it? Why is Donald Trump, why is Joe Biden so terrible at this when they lived through a world that was worse than the one you or I were born into?
This is hard because there are a lot of different dimensions to it. Even in the Cold War, there was a fair amount of growth of government. The Cold War saw 90% tax rates on something. So that was insane restrictions on, where the government was calling the shots on many, many industries, like right down to what kind of silverware you used on airplanes. So there were some fringe who disagreed, but we all kind of agreed communism was bad.
Right.
But a lot of things that some people in this room might think are communism adjacent were not so bad, even pre-Cold War. So many things, when you disagree with someone, first you assume you're right. Because I do.
Sure.
But assuming you're right, you always are faced with the why are they wrong? And again, assuming you are totally convinced you're right, it is either because they are stupid or they are lying. I think most people start out lying a bit and a lot of cognitive dissonance. And when you've been saying something for a while, did Trump actually believe he won the election when he first said it? I'm not so sure.
Oh, really?
I mean the one in the middle.
Yeah, 2020.
He did win the other two.
Yeah.
Does he believe it now? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I think there is a fair amount of cluelessness. People see things getting better, and they don't connect the dots. They're not reading what people in this room are reading. They're reading a lot of propaganda about how unfair it is, on how many terrible things are going on. And then everything in the world, and I might have these too, becomes somewhat of a grift. when your business is believing one thing, when you're on this side, you find a lot of reasons. The old Upton Sinclair, or Upton Sinclair. I always get my Upton Sinclair and Sinclair Lewis.
Upton
backwards.
Sinclair was the socialist. Okay. Sinclair Lewis was the boring
but
writer.
Some version of if someone's career depends on something.
Right. Yeah.
And that professional politicians, I think a lot of them totally lose track of what they actually believe.
Why don't we jump right into contemporary policy then? Because you're outspoken about this, and I highly recommend following Cliff on Twitter. And we'll get to a portion where I go through a couple of his juicier tweets, which are very good. He's
Probably
a very
ones
good
I've
Twitter
deleted
troll.
that he's dug up.
Yeah, sure.
Wayback
the
Machine
internet
is
is
gonna nail
forever,
me.
Cliff. Trump with tariffs, let's say. Okay, and it's kind of a multi-part question. Trump, for his entire life, has been pro-tariff. He has not really wavered from that. He says, I'm a tariff man. Yeah. Tariff is the most beautiful word in the dictionary, which sounds like another book he hasn't really read. But so do you think...
I've read it cover to cover because I figured it has all the other books in it.
That's right.
That's a line from MASH. I stole it.
Do you think Trump started out not believing that tariffs were good and has lied himself into it, or?
Okay. I don't think I have Trump derangement syndrome, and I'm not a fan.
Well, then you do, if you're a Trump fan, like you.
You get called that all the time if you say anything critical. I have absolutely, of all the people in the world, my clue as to what's actually going on inside his head is very low.
Yeah.
I would modify what you said a little bit. Yes, he loves tariffs, but I think even more fundamental, he hates trade. Yeah. Like, it's not an accident that formula had nothing to do with tariffs.
Right.
This ridiculous formula.
Why do you think he hates trade?
That is very hard to... It's very hard to get to that one.
Right.
It's very hard for me to understand anyone hating trade, and empirically, a lot of people seem to hate trade.
Why is trade good? Why should we embrace trade?
Do you really not know, Nick?
I know, but we're in front of the kids, Cliff. Come on.
Well, for the non-economists or the first-timers in the room, the most basic idea is the economic idea of comparative advantage. That you make not just what you're best at making, but what you're relatively best at making. So if Nick is better at making both guns and butter than I am, and we need both of these. Well, we're libertarians. We need a lot of guns, right?
Yeah.
And butter's delicious.
Well, now it's tallow. We're in the tallow and guns era, not guns and butter.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm still going guns and butter. So you're better than me at producing both. But you're way better than me at producing guns, and you're a little better at me at producing butter. You shouldn't produce both. Right. You should produce the guns, I should produce the butter. It's not very hard to say the pie.
And then I give you $1 because I want the butter more than I want the dollar, and we both leave the trade feeling good.
Everyone's better off. I mean, again, it's a libertarian crowd. I hope it's a libertarian crowd.
Yeah.
If it's not a net libertarian crowd, I'd be very disappointed. But these transactions are almost entirely voluntary. Right. Everyone thinks they're better off when we export and when we import, and I'm sure they're usually right. Sometimes they buy some stupid things. I do.
Okay, so we don't know why Trump is pro-tariff and anti-trade. What about the people around him? Kind of boning up for this, I read a piece from the 2016 campaign that you had written where you were kind of, I don't want Trump to win. I'm a Marco Rubio guy, right? You supported Rubio, not casting judgment.
A radical libertarian, I know.
But Rubio now is out there saying to people like, Trump is exactly right about everything, including trade, including tariffs, that, countries that we have a trade deficit with are cheating us. Does Marco
Marco's
Rubio
actually
believe
agreed that he's little.
Okay, yeah. He's got vanity tax now, right? But so what? You would assume this is his grift.
Grift is too mean, actually. There is some, again, I said it before, but there is some cognitive dissonance go on. When you join a team, and this is why I don't like joining a lot of teams. When you join a team, you may agree with them on half the things. You may think they're way better than the alternative. Right. But now you're on a team, and the whole team believes this. And you got a guy at the head of the team who punishes disbelievers in an extreme way. So you start saying mild versions that you hope doesn't get you in trouble. That's a gateway drug. Mm-hmm. Pretty soon, you're saying, Steve Witkoff is the greatest diplomat ever in the history of humanity. Yeah. It's far from just, I do not want to single out Rubio. I still actually kind of like the guy. Yeah. But to get that level of sycophancy, mm-hmm. Is that a word?
I think so.
Sycophant's a word. Is sycophancy a word?
Sycophant.
If not, it should be.
Yeah.
You need a leader who relishes it and mm-hmm. will punish the lack of it.
Right.
So you have cognitive dissonance, which is not a morally negative thing. It's just a natural human thing. And then you have the more negative ideas of both fear and greed. Mm-hmm. You can ask, you may be intending to ask me the same question about a lot of corporate executives, a lot of money managers.
Yeah, I want to bring that up.
Who toe the line. Fear. I feel fear.
Yeah.
I'm hoping, don't take this the wrong way, that nobody watches this.
Yeah. Okay. I can almost guarantee
because
that.
They're
not
somewhat
happy about it, but
they're somewhat vindictive people. I don't care who you are. Having this set of people mad at you is not comfortable. I got to tell you, I criticized Obama and Biden like crazy. The first political thing I ever wrote was a broadside against Obama when he was telling money managers they should forego some of their bond rights mm-hmm. on the auto companies because the auto companies were in trouble. And I'm like, we're legally not allowed to do that. We're what's called fiduciaries. We cannot give away our clients' money for a cause, no matter how good it may or bad it may be. So I've criticized all these people. I was never nervous about it before. I never thought there'd be retribution. I don't know what it would take. I happen to lead a pretty squeaky clean life. You have to believe me on that. I can't prove it to you now. But it is scary. So the fear side is real. Mm-hmm. And the greed side. The greed could be for literal money. It could be for power. It could be for just recognition. Mm-hmm. But the reward benefit system of power liking you and the punishment system of it disliking you is very strong. So in real life, it's a melange of those two and cognitive dissonance, and it's obviously a pretty powerful force.
So right now, just thinking broadly about these terms, we have, the Trump administration going after law firms that, represented people or causes he didn't like. They've attacked Columbia, or they've extracted concessions out of Columbia. They've tried that with other colleges to mixed results so far. Most recently, it sounds like Amazon, that Jeff Bezos bent the knee. Is this different from the past, or is this more of the same, and we're just touchy about it because Donald Trump is the greatest president ever, and us little people just want to criticize him because we're not him?
It's some of both. When you debate, discuss, I have good friends who are much bigger Trump fans than I am. I'm not. Again, there are things he's doing I like. There are parts of Doge I like. Now, some of it's a little nuts, and it claims that it's going to be all this, and but the whole idea of Trump is nobody stays where they were before. Mm-hmm. The amount he's moved the Overton window on everything is just staggering. You think about it. I have this, every once in a while, some friend who does not like me, which is...
Sounds like a close friend, you mean. Maybe a family member.
Tells me, you should run for office. And I go, first of all, I have no desire to, but second, I can't. I've said all these wacky out there things. And they go, have you paid any attention to what the man who's actually in the office has done? That is no longer a bar to you. So I went off on a speech and forgot your original question. So
okay,
you may repeat it. I will answer it.
Well, is Trump acting qualitatively different?
Oh,
or is this what he's doing is really revealing the way the world has always worked?
This is where I were before I went on my tangent. So you have a friend who likes Trump, And when Trump does something outrageous, like going after a law firm, they look at you and they go, do you think Obama didn't put pressure on private firms to do what he wanted? When you say Trump's son's starting a crypto business and launching a coin an hour and a half before he became president and deregulated crypto is corrupt, they go, Hunter Biden sells paintings. And, or even worse, some things of magnitude. The Clinton Foundation was a money laundering scheme. Now it's a race to see whether the Trumpers get me or Hillary has me commit suicide.
No, this is like you're not walking out of here alive, so yeah.
But what Trump's magical ability is, in poker they call it coming over the top. Someone bets and you bet back at them way bigger. Magnitude counts in the world. There are misdemeanors and there are felonies. I think that's the issue. And a lot of these things, you can play whataboutism. And the left has done a lot of crazy things. I think they went after Trump way too much in his first presidency. I think it's part of what kind of drove him a little crazier. Right. I think the prosecutions, some of them were legit, some of them were not very legit. The one he was convicted on was, a novel legal theory. Yes, a novel legal theory. So the case that lawfare was first used against him is not a bad case. It still feels, and once you get into the qualitative versus quantitative, there's a judgment going on. It still feels like proactively issuing executive orders against specific law firms because they represented people you didn't like. Right. Is going after TV networks because they edit an interview a way that you found unflattering. And some of these, he got concessions on that one. I think it is, if not an order of magnitude, is considerably further than we've seen before. But he gets to all the time. He doesn't articulate it that well, but his people can all the time go, well, you were okay with this. And I, of course, like you probably do, scream, I was not okay with that. Right. And I'm not okay with what you're doing. Where are the countervailing forces, either, in the market, say? Because, it's one thing if Trump is pushing around little Marco and a bunch of, sycophants in his cabinet, right? Or Republican congressional leaders, or that we've never heard of, or who probably wouldn't pass a brain test, a brain death test. But where in the market is there pushback? I mean, is there going in the business community? Is there serious pushback to this? Because it seems like it's corrupting, or it has the potential to corrupt faith in markets. Well, so far, the only thing that has kind of pushed back hard, and as of now, at least partially won, is the market. All right? Trump can say all he wants. I don't care. I'm not looking at that. Yeah. He rolled a lot back because the bond and the stock market were collapsing. Right. And I mean, today, I think, when we're recording this, he tweeted that, this stock market is the one he inherited from Joe Biden. But in January, he was saying, before he took office, this stock market is mine. Yeah. And just as someone who watches this every day, even though I shouldn't as a quant, there's no reason I watch it every day, but I watch it all day. The market effectively crashed. This was a big down exactly after he said giant tariffs, and then oscillated for the next 10 days based gigantically, huge moves, based precisely on whether he seemed to be easing off the tariffs or doubling down. It's a 100% tariff-driven market. Literally everyone knows that. I don't know if he's gaslighting himself. Yeah. That's always the question, but he's gaslighting the rest of us with that. At the top of your Twitter feed, you have a link to your academic article database, because you write academics. Yes. You have a PhD in finance. Your advisor, if I'm remembering correctly, or wrote it down correctly, was Eugene Fama. Yeah, Nobel laureate, efficient market hypothesis. Do you rub it in? He's still alive. Do you rub it in that you have more money than him? Does he still take your calls? I don't even call him Gene. Yeah. Let alone rub it in. Okay. I call him Professor, and for like 35 years now, he's been like, call me Gene. Yeah. Gene also worked with a firm called Dimensional Fund Advisors and did very well. Okay. Doing pretty much the same stuff we do, but calling it efficient markets. Yeah. That pisses me off a little bit. So now I hope Gene doesn't watch this. And I love Gene. Your other kind of mentor was Kenneth French, and between him and
Gene's
Fama,
they talk a lot about efficient market theory. The most recent article that you have posted on your academic articles is called something like the less efficient market theory. And in that, you kind of argue that maybe the incredible information machine that markets are is working less well, even though we're much more globalized. We have much more database. We just have much more information. Can you explain a little bit about why it might be less efficient than it used to be?
No, I can explain a lot of it.
Okay.
The next 7 minutes are Nick's fault.
Okay.
So you're going to get a little geeky discourse. The efficient market hypothesis is actually a very subtle concept to test. It's very hard to test. In principle, it's very simple. Market prices reflect all information in a rational, reasonable way. It has never been the case. Nobody serious has ever believed markets are perfect. No libertarian should believe that. Perfect is a stupid thing to believe.
Oh, then they'll believe it.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you have more experience with that than me. I mean libertarians, not stupid.
Yes. Well,
Gene, I took the class, and then I was the teaching assistant for the next 2 years. And I sat through it. I sat there every lecture all 3 years. Somewhere in like the third week of class, after introducing the efficient market hypothesis, he tells the class, just to be clear, markets are assuredly not perfectly efficient. And the class gasps. I think only at the University of Chicago, and probably only in Gene's class at the University of Chicago, does that elicit a gasp. In most of the world, people go, what's the efficient market hypothesis? Yeah. And for the people who know, most of them say, duh, of course it's not perfect. But once you admit something is not perfect, how imperfect it is and whether that changes through time become legitimate things to study. We have witnessed the thing that almost killed us from 18 through 20 that Nick so beautifully led with, if you recall.
It didn't kill me.
And the dot-com bubble were the two biggest in about 100 years of data. I do use the word bubble. I use it rarely. I think the Wall Street throws it around too much. They dumb it down to like, I don't like that stock. It's a bubble. A bubble has to be very pervasive. It has to be, for me, my definition is it has to be prices at a level that I've tried very hard to justify with the most wildly optimistic assumptions I can, and I don't get close. I do think the dot-com, it's in the name, the dot-com bubble, 99, 2000, and certainly even pre-COVID, but after COVID, I think the differentials between stock prices of the ones that were darlings and the ones that were shunned got to epic levels never seen before, and I've seen it twice in my career. The first time, I was like, this is a 1 in 75-year event. When it happened again 20 years later, I did start going, maybe something has changed to make things a little less efficient. Maybe not all the time, but prone to crazies, prone to bubbles. And I do think it has happened. I think those were bubbles. And in this paper I wrote, I have basically 3 hypotheses. One of them is just about interest rates. It's boring. I'm not going to do it here. One of them is the rise of passive investing. I usually am taking the other side. There's a set of people who think passive investing, index fund investing, Vanguard, Jack Bogle, buying one of everything at market cap weights and just holding it. There are people out there who think it's the devil, who think it's destroying the world. There is a paper.
What is the short reason?
Oh, there's so many. They're not wrong. Again, everything in life is subtler than black and white wants it to be. You need a certain number of people trying to set accurate prices on securities. If markets are efficient, they don't become efficient by magic. Right. They become efficient by sweat. And passive doesn't do that. There are other subtler things like arguments about when you flow into passive, does it move the price of the big caps more than the small caps because you're buying more of them? It's not exactly clear. There's some evidence it does. Which would create a bigger disparity than perhaps there used to be. But it's not a very strong evidence. But it's mostly there aren't enough people looking at prices. And they're right in the extreme. I write this in the piece. PhD students in finance or economics at some point will get really drunk, meaning like 3 wine coolers for PhD students in this area. I went to these parties. They were wild, man. And late at night, 10:30, they will say, what if 100% of the market tried to be Jack Bogle indexed? And it breaks your brain. It's a singularity. It's a black hole. It doesn't make any sense. Literally nobody is saying, is NVIDIA worth more than the corner drugstore? We're all trying to free ride off each other. There was an article in Bloomberg that I wrote a response to. The title of the paper, I may get it slightly wrong, but I think I'm getting it right. Index funds are worse than Marxism. In general, the only thing I was pleased about that was the tacit belief that Marxism is bad. Yeah. You don't always see that in Bloomberg. But the argument there was index funds free ride off the investors who are still doing the work. And they absolutely do.
So that's one of the things that might contribute to a less efficient market theory. But what's the third one?
Okay. I'm spending too much time on that.
Yeah.
You see how he does that? He's so good at this. The third one is the one I think is the biggest. So Nick's right. We should move to that. I sound like a very old man when I talk about this because I go, it's the kids with their iPhones and their social media and their gamified
Is it the
investing.
wearing baseball caps backwards as well?
You know when you know you're old? When you're at not even a super fancy, but a nice restaurant, and you see someone wearing a baseball cap and you just want to knock it off their head.
Right. Okay.
That's when you know you've turned into not just your father, your grandfather. You've skipped it. So for a market to be efficient, it crucially depends on a concept I'm sure most of us have heard many times, the wisdom of crowds. The idea is most of us in this room might not know the answer to a question. None of us might be sure. But if we all have a little information in the right answer, in the right direction, if you take the average of all our answers, it's way better than asking one of us. If you ever watched the Regis Philbin, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? The best lifeline, the best cheat, is a multiple choice quiz show. The best cheat was ask the audience. It was better than phone your smartest friend. Because it turned out most people chose the smartest friend who knew the same shit they knew. It wasn't helpful. Ask the Audience I didn't watch every one, certainly, but I never saw it fail. Because maybe, 20% of the people knew it. The other 80% are evenly distributed over the four. So you see 20, 20, 20, 40. And you pick 40. There's a key to that, though. For that to work, the crowd has to be relatively independent. If the crowd all gets together to decide on an answer, maybe the ones who know it influence them in the right direction, but maybe they don't. A crowd that gets to talk to each other is not necessarily a wise crowd. It can be an unruly, dangerous, and quite stupid mob. Have you ever seen anything better than social media for turning a potentially wise crowd into an unruly mob? I don't think I have to convince many people. You guys can argue. You can ask me in the Q&A if you disagree, that social media has generally made our politics more coarse, more adversarial, more extreme. Why it would have that effect on our politics and not affect our markets? Markets are just voting mechanisms. They just add up all the people weighted by their money. Yes, Jeff Bezos gets a bigger vote than me, and I get a bigger vote than a lot of people, but it's just a weighted average voting mechanism. So if that kind of mechanism screws up some of the wise crowd, it's going to screw up markets to some degree also. So I think this has been going on. I think ultimately, I'm not super pessimistic. I think even in politics, eventually people adjust to a new world, and I'm not a total pessimist on the human race, but we ain't there yet.
Can you quantify how less efficient the market is than it used to be? Or it's just,
and in this piece, which you obviously only skimmed.
That's right, I read the abstract.
I start out saying—
I'm a busy man.
I sent you like 1,000 pieces too.
Yes,
I was addicted. I kept being like, I wrote that? I forgot about that one. I got to send it to Nick. I was sending him things like late afternoon today, thinking he's going to—
The erotic poetry is— well, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that later.
You found my pseudonym.
Yeah.
Was that Seinfeld where George kept saying if he were a porn star, he'd be buck naked.
Yeah.
He found that very— I start out this thing saying this is largely old man op-ed.
Yeah.
I can tell you there have been two giant bubbles. I can tell you here are my hypotheses, which I do believe. When I say their opinion, I'm not running from those opinions. They're my opinions. But quantifying exactly how inefficient they've gotten. Nobody in financial economics knows how to do that, let alone me.
Is quant finance, which you've helped really kind of, move to the next level and kind of define, or operationalize, is that a way out of this?
No.
Or no?
No. Well, if everyone invested with AQR, it would be a rational world, of course.
I think there'd be a lot of angry people in this
we
room
got creamed in the last.
if they were from 2018.
In the last huge bubble, we got creamed.
Yeah.
And the marginal investor, a lot of people stuck with us, or we wouldn't be here at all. But the marginal person who left us within 3 months of the bottom. And it did not work out for them.
Yeah.
Again, I'll brag, we way more than came back. There's a bug in the system right now. And by the way, I say this in the piece, my ranting, and it is a lot of ranting, about markets getting less efficient, doesn't mean I don't think they're still the most efficient way to allocate capital that God has ever seen.
Right.
I am not suddenly saying we need a Politburo, that we need Donald Trump saying it's like a grocery store where I set each price. No, markets are awesome, and over 5-10 years, they're still awesome. That was a 2 to 3 year period, and we're
so I mean,
mostly
that's
back to
the efficient market hypothesis, among other things, suggests over time the market at any given moment might be kind of messed up, but over time it works pretty well to coordinate economic activity.
The Warren Buffett quote that short term the market is a voting mechanism, long term it is a weighing mechanism. It's kind of cute.
Yeah.
I mean, it's short term it's a vote, and social media can. But if the reality is not there, reality does win, and markets eventually incorporate reality. If prices are so high that no amount of reasonable earnings growth, for instance, can justify them, frustratingly, you might have to wait for 2 or 3 years to show people this. But it is going to get the right answer. I am just saying I do believe it moves away from the right answer faster, larger, and for longer than it used to.
In one of the many pieces that you sent me, which was great, from 2016 at Real Clear Politics, you called yourself a part-time Republican and full-time libertarian, and then after that, in parentheses, you said, think social liberal, fiscal conservative.
I actually hate that shorthand. It's just the only one that works for so many people, and certainly fiscal conservative doesn't mean what it used to mean.
No, and socially liberal, right, doesn't either, because that means you want to shut down free speech and tell people how to live and all that. How did you come to that kind of set of beliefs?
All right, I grew up in a Jewish family on Long Island. So we grew up.
No, that would explain why you joined the Bund movement, not necessarily why you would become a libertarian, right? Why you would be anti-Semitic, not. No. I've seen Woody Allen.
I don't like a lot of people in my family. Does that make me an anti-Semite?
I think it might. Yeah.
I got some uncles who really. Yeah. I was not very political. Even through college, our family was what I'd call unenthusiastic Democrats. Because, with some exceptions, Jews were Democrats, and I got to the University of Chicago to go to this PhD program. I went straight from undergrad. And what's really odd is I effectively, over about 3 to 6 months, became a fairly rabid libertarian, Randian, classical liberal, some version of it. I'm less radical now than I was. I think that's just age. But the funny part is it must have been in the water, because it wasn't in the courses. The courses I were taking were they were a lot of high-end math, but they were still fairly vocational. How to price an option under weird conditions. There's not a lot of politics to how to price an option. Even Gene Fama's class. Gene is a strong free marketer. And the efficient market hypothesis, if you're a believer, we're close to efficiency. And again, I don't think we're radically terrible. That has a free market flavor. But he does zero free market preaching. But somehow I knew what the University of Chicago's reputation was, and I started reading.
Yeah, what did you read?
I probably read a bunch of Milton Friedman, some early, I don't even know if it was that early, some Thomas Sowell. That man's a god. I definitely got to Hayek. And this was like while being a first-year PhD student, this stuff's not helping at all.
Right.
So I came home a radical.
your real work,
and then I radicalized my family. My family became very libertarian, conservative. They'd switch off.
So can I ask what, you know, the free market stuff makes sense, but then you made the leap to be, okay, you know, but I also believe in social liberalism, for lack of a better term.
Basically, it means
not
I don't-
everybody makes that connection.
I don't give a fuck what you do.
Yeah. Where,
Do you need more than that to be our kind of social liberal?
No, I don't think so. But
Furthermore, if I did give a fuck, I don't think I have a fucking right to fucking tell you what to do.
yeah.
I just felt like cursing. It's very transgressive for a CEO to come up here and curse.
Well, thank you.
Does that
for
ruin the podcast?
No,
Do
that
you have
makes
to
it.
bleep that?
I usually no. We actually
Oh,
turn it up.
I'd love to be bleeped.
Yeah.
That would be like a life
Yeah,
highlight for
not
me.
this time, sweetheart. Do you feel like the world more broadly is getting to that form of libertarianism, of people like basically, you know, they want a market that works, they want a government that works but doesn't overdo it, and they want to, you know, live and let live world? Or is that receding?
No, I think it's receding.
Yeah.
Certainly in the medium term. The arc of history still bends our way. Both of those things, you know, I said government has gotten bigger, but again, prosperity has grown. Socially liberal things, again, our definition, have made huge progress over time. I was actually part of a Republican donor effort to get marriage equality approved in New York. We have a nice New York Times article on it. This was like a bunch of the Republicans in state legislature were terrified to vote for this. So a few of us said, how about if we give you an awful lot of money? And it turns out that can work.
Yeah.
I know.
So I mean, we might.
But yeah, right now,
why
the
why
right
aren't
is not socially liberal.
Yeah,
the
why
left hates any kind of speech and is willing to shut you down over things.
Yeah.
Both the left and the right. You're going to put up some of my tweets, I know, but
Yeah.
one of my favorites I did today was we have two. When it comes to economics, we have two
Economically far left and economically ignorant parties. They just differ in their preferred pronouns.
Yes, that's
which
what
is
I said.
very well put. And that was on top of a Barry Weiss podcast where she was talking to her Free Press colleague Batya Ungar-Sargon.
Sargon, Cougar Mellencamp.
Yeah. But why
So
do
many
you,
of you are too young to get that.
Why?
I got to stop making jokes. Only this guy can get.
But why do you think in a world where, you know, the partisan politics, you have fewer and fewer people want to identify as a Republican or as a Democrat, and it seems like a place to go where there's a lot of fun happening is being socially liberal and fiscally conservative, but you're saying we're moving away from that. What explains the rush to economically far left and economically ignorant stances?
People have believed some of these stupid ideas forever. The left has had idiotic economics for forever. It's gotten more idiotic. You don't need me to tell you that, you know, Joe Biden came in as a centrist and became a Bernie surrogate. Again, I don't remember her whole name. Sargon is the end. Miss Sargon. She was a self-identified Marxist before she became MAGA. She is still a Marxist. She just doesn't use that word.
She calls
says
herself a
populist.
MAGA leftist.
Yeah. So people have always believed these ideas, the allure. You know, real communism has never been tried. We've never stamped that out.
Yeah.
And it ebbs and flows, and I'm still not totally distraught that it won't ebb after flowing for a while. I do think the hope is that middle, right? People have to get. I don't think either the left, the Bernie left, which is a lot of the party at this point, or the MAGA right, changes in a direction we would like. There has to be enough independence that either take over or force them to change.
Right.
And again, it's like the market being right eventually. I'm not a pessimist that we'll get there at some point, but how much hell we'll have to go through before we get there is...
Can you make an argument, because this is something that both the kind of populist right and the populist left talk about, that, you know, the common American, the forgotten man, is doing worse now than they were 30 years ago or 50 years ago. Do you think, is that inaccurate reflection, or is that a misunderstanding of basic reality?
It's an absolute misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And it's a dangerous one for me to talk about because I get people going, sure, a rich money manager says it's all fine, and then they call me all kinds of names. Standards of living in this country, we're not a basket case. One of my favorites is Michael Strain of AEI has a book on, I forgot the exact title, but you should read it. It's just a whole bunch of stats. Median incomes have gone up substantially over time. They're very cherry-picked endpoints. You can show them they're only going up a little. It's not true.
And can you explain why does the median income going up matter?
Because people like more income.
Yeah. Okay.
Prosperity.
Right.
Again, we can have our Bhutanian gross national happiness measure. You guys remember when the government of Bhutan said we're replacing GDP with gross national happiness?
Yeah, that's because they're in like the bottom 10 nations for GDP, right? So it's kind of smart.
Mostly, I'm not. You know, I've had a lot of sad, tough things in my life. Money does not insulate you from anything, but it is pretty friggin' correlated to prosperity and happiness. It is an important first thing. Then you have to be nice and have good relationships and have good health. These are not small secondary things. But the general idea that people can afford more stuff and something much harder to measure, most of the stuff is way better. Mm-hmm. And that's always been one of the great Achilles heels of economics is measuring the quality of things. That's why some people, it's really interesting, are moving to standards of instead of measuring price levels, measuring the amount of time the average person has to work to get it, whatever it is. And that has come down fairly radically on almost everything. So yeah, if you tell me people have to work less to have the same, or if they work the same, they have more, I will die on the hill of that being good.
Is it ultimately a cultural battle that needs to be won to kind of explain that to people? And, you know, if people have a lack of meaning in their life, you know, you have more time to create that meaning. So that's a good thing.
I'm only going to tell you pessimistic things. I don't have an answer to this one, or I would try to help. Nothing works better than telling people they're getting screwed in politics.
Yeah.
You can go through history. It's happened a million times. You have a politician who's up there and says, actually, you guys have it pretty good, and I ain't going to do very much if you elect me. I think I'd vote for that guy. I don't think a lot of people, that's been going on forever. What's a little sad in this country is typically that always has appeal, but it has its by far biggest appeal when things are actually bad. You know, grievance politics. You can go to your extreme examples in history. We're managing to do it from a level of fairly high, broad-based prosperity, and that's disappointing, but I don't have an easy answer. Me simply explaining it to him on Twitter so far has not worked.
Yeah. Well, maybe the next one. We'll break
we're one tweet away.
Break the dam. Speaking of tweets, here's one from April 9th. And this was in response to a long tweet thread by Bill Ackman, who was talking about why really when you think about it, when you think about it, Trump's tariffs make a lot of sense, and he's really playing 30-dimensional chess. Something along those lines. And then, Cliff, you wrote, one of the main benefits of making some money is not having to wear a gimp suit for anybody. Can you...
And maybe my most liked tweet ever.
That?
I feel a little bad because, like I said before, if you pick it on Marco, pick it on Bill, Bill's actually been great on some of the Israel stuff for me. And I don't like what Trump is necessarily doing on higher education, but Bill was early on saying something is broken.
Right. And calling out Harvard in particular as just a kind of cesspool of stupid
Yeah, he
policies.
does make sure we know he went to Harvard every time.
Yeah.
But he's allowed. He's done well for himself.
You know, based on his tariff position, he's better start wearing the gear because it's not coming through in his thinking, right?
I lashed out at him, because I have a disease, which you've probably noticed. If I think something is funny, the probability I'm going to say it or tweet it is very, very high. in a somewhat dangerous to myself manner at times. And the other is his tweet really did bug me for the reasons Nick keeps bringing up. Trump is not playing any dimensional chess. Maybe one-dimensional chess is insulting. I'll say that. Nick's earlier point that he's hated tariffs and my saying, no, it's even broader, he's hated trade forever, is true. If I believed for a second that his main goal is to have most of the world have lower tariffs, including the United States, and the way he thinks you get to that goal is massive bluffing, brinksmanship. I may not agree with the strategy. I actually may. If someone sat down and said, this is what we're doing, and we'll back off if it doesn't work, I may even agree with the strategy. I simply, and by the way, by dumb friggin' luck, we could actually get there. I don't think it's going to happen, but if the whole world caved and he had no choice, I know he always has a choice. He does what he feels like. But if the whole world caved, it would be pretty hard for him not to go cool and do it also. But I don't think he's doing that. So to say he's playing four-dimensional chess is just, I'm on your team. I fear you. I want you to like me. Please don't hurt me. Game of Thrones bending the knee. And I don't know, for enough fear, maybe there's something I would do that over. I hope not. I wouldn't wear the latex gimp suit. I draw the line.
But
there.
you want a fabric that breathes, or I guess that's not
eye
really,
holes.
Yeah. All right. But we can see your pornographic movies. You're buck naked.
Buck naked.
Right. Okay. We're going to leave it there. We've been talking with Cliff Asness.
We started with a gross failure of
Yeah.
assets, and we're ending with buck naked.
Yeah. And thank you, Cliff.